So today we got Nick Hunter, Sheriff, Marion County Sheriff.
Yes.
Welcome.
Yeah.
Happy to be here.
Thank you. So we've known you for a little bit, but we want to get to know you as a sheriff and like what is being a sheriff like? What has your career been up to this point? Can you give us some background of like where you started to where you're at now as far as your career goes?
Sure. That's kind of actually a very long question.
He's like, it's a very loaded
We could probably
question.
take that one, move it the whole
version
time.
of that.
Yeah. So Cliff Notes version is that I grew up in Lake Oswego in Clackamas County, and I grew up, my family is a bunch of doctors. And so I kind of became a little bit of the black sheep of the family as to what I wanted to do.
Doctors,
But
really? Wow.
a lot of doctors.
What kind of doctors is it like?
I've got neurosurgeons.
No way.
My dad was an anesthesiologist. And so the family business, and there's two hunters in my family, which is odd because I've got relatives in the UK, and they're also hunters.
Okay.
So my family crest, my mother's Scottish. None of that is relevant to any of this.
But it's good to know.
It's good to know.
It's good
There you
to know,
go.
yeah.
That's
Yeah.
background information.
Fun fact.
So I followed my father's footsteps, came to Willamette University. I actually came down here to play baseball. He had graduated on his way to Kirksville, Missouri, to become an anesthesiologist. But I followed in his footsteps and said, let's do this. Let's follow the medical route.
Okay.
I walked all the way I got to organic chemistry, and organic chemistry was not fun.
What is organic chemistry?
See,
even?
that's why it's not
I've never
fun.
even heard of that.
It's a whole lot of equations and other things
Wow,
like
that. Sounds
that.
really boring.
As much as I like math,
Brian's like, that sounds horrible.
that was it was not the class that I found the most interesting. And my dad was great because he knew I was on a medical path at that point, and he just said, with HMOs, with everything that's going on, is this really what you want to do? I said, I don't know. So at the time, I happened to be working at Gold's Gym in the off season from baseball, and I met now a sergeant for the Salem Police Department, Mike Baskett, and I went on a ride along with Mike. And it took all of about 2 minutes of riding with Mike, and I said, this is what I want to do.
Wow.
Oh,
This
that's
is
awesome.
absolutely what I want to do. This is the ability to give back and contribute to the community, yet it's something different every day. I'm picturing kind of extrapolating what I'm doing with Mike and realizing that never once are you going to do the same thing 2 days in a row.
Every day is an adventure.
Absolutely.
Oh.
So I changed my major to psychology, finished up my time at Willamette, and then started out originally as a reserve for Marion County. I kind of got in as much as I could, so I also worked at the jail. Started out as a facility security aide, which is the sub-controls in the jail. And as soon as I had graduated as a reserve, that allowed me to then go be a temporary deputy and actually work on the floor in the jail. So
What year was this?
this is 2001 going into 2002.
Okay.
Um,
So we're talking two decades ago.
We are.
Wow.
This is
So
this,
what
this
drew
is
you
what
to the
dates me.
county specifically? I mean, there's a lot of reserve programs. What was the county one?
So the county, and it's very interesting, and we can talk about that a little bit about reserves and the value that reserves bring to the organization. When I got into the reserve program, there was about 40 of us. There was a command structure that existed in the reserve program. I had about 100 hours a week that I was working, but I was putting in nearly 80 hours a month as a reserve as well. Just trying to do as much as I could, really learning about the enforcement side while working in the jail side, trying to see where I sort of found my best fit. I found it. I really enjoyed the enforcement side. And so I left being a reserve with Marion County, and I actually got hired full-time with the City of Independence.
So now in a reserve position, is that paid or is that volunteered?
That is a volunteer position.
So you're 80 hours volunteer per week.
Well, not per week.
Per month.
Per month.
Per month. I mean, per month.
I still had to give my
You
my
did
40.
nothing else but volunteer your time.
Yes.
That's dedication.
2 shifts
right
a
there.
day. Okay, wow.
Yeah, no, it was it was a lot of hours, but remember, I was very single and very much doing whatever I wanted at the time, and so it was about 60 hours a week that I would put into the jail with overtime shifts and other pieces, and then I would be able to spend about 20 hours, really 2 shifts a week, is what I got out to work on the weekends with the reserve program, and that was riding with another full-time deputy.
Okay.
So wanting to do this, I actually ended up going to the City of Independence, being hired full-time over there. I think that was one of the best things I ever did. The idea of Marion County a mid-sized agency, about 400 employees. And so when you go over and you work for a small municipality, you actually have to do everything. There's no special teams. There's one detective, but that one detective is busy. And so you really learn to do things from start to finish and own the entirety of it. And so it's great because when I did have other opportunities I had over there, I worked on the narcotics team, which was the Polk Interagency Narcotics team. So instead of my 2.2 square miles of independence with one street light, I did get into the entire county. I was able to work narcotics investigations for a couple years over there, always knowing I was coming back to Marion County. I made a lot of relationships when I started out here. This was always my family, and I always told when I left to go to Independence, I said I was coming back. And so
very intentional then.
Oh, very intentional. Okay. There was no doubt. And so in 2008, I actually received a number of phone calls from those that were working at Marion County and basically saying, "Come back. It's time. Come back here." And so came back to Marion County in 2008. Brought everything that I had learned over at Independence and really just started applying that. In 2012, I promoted to sergeant, and then 2015 promoted to lieutenant. And I remained a lieutenant for that almost 8 years until I was appointed as the sheriff. And the vast amount of things that I was able to do. I worked in 2 of the divisions. I worked in enforcement as a lieutenant. I actually worked in operations too. Had a chance to work directly with now I consider it 3 administrations. So the Jason Myers and Troy Clausen administration, moving on to the Joe Cast and the Jeff Wood administration, and then the third one, well, that's my administration. And so I've had a chance.
Time's a charm.
Yep,
Yeah.
Had a chance to work with my own team and really learn from those that have come before me. Really take the things that I feel were important when it comes to communication, how we listen, how we get out in the community, and then adapt those really to our own style now in the current position that I'm in.
So as a sheriff, I mean, it's a big decision becoming a sheriff. What do you give up in patrol that maybe you've got to take into consideration as you make this leap into like a more of an administrative type of role?
I don't think people realize what a big commitment that is, and not just for you, but for your family, like everybody in your circle.
So you guys are on it. That's a great question. When you talk about things that you give up. So in 2010, I did one thing I really enjoyed. I joined SWAT. So I became part of SWAT in 2010, and I really progressed through the ranks in SWAT. In 2016, I took over as the SWAT commander. So those things, use of force, I'm a national expert in use of force. That's something I've been building since 2012. All of these pieces, when you are sort of faced with the idea of being the sheriff, you give these things up. And so I consider myself, and Paige Clarkson, the DA, we joke about this a lot. So I'm a reluctant sheriff.
You're a reluctant sheriff.
And what that means is when Joe Cast had to retire and said, I've got to retire. And so what it was based on being over 2 years and a day into his term, that meant that the Board of Commissioners could then essentially appoint a successor to finish his term that would then come into the current election here that we're experiencing in 2024. And so when I initially looked at it, I never had the aspirations to be sheriff. I always had the aspirations to be the undersheriff. I wanted to be the undersheriff. I wanted to be in charge of personnel. I wanted to be in charge of day-to-day operations. That's what I saw. But when I looked at those that had then put their names in and were wanting to compete in this appointment process, I looked at it, the relationships I'd built, the number of folks in the agency that basically told me, you have to do this. You can't sit back and watch this happen. You have to get involved in this. And so reluctantly, and it was literally the day before the applications were due for the appointment process, I said, okay. And I put my name in there a little bit reluctantly, completed that appointment process. And so the unanimous vote was from the commissioners was definitely a vote of confidence. And I think there's some significant pieces when we talk about you give things up, but you gain. And so really being able now to look at the complexities of the sheriff's office, it is 4 divisions. And when you talk about 4 divisions, it's really like looking at having 4 individual police departments that are now under our control. And one of the ways the undersheriff and I joke about it, I consider that I have 4 police chiefs. My undersheriff is the city manager, and I'm the mayor. And so we kind of have our own city that we very much run. Our city just happens to be 1,200 square miles. And we've got 20 incorporated cities and 11 police agencies in Marion County. And so the complexities of having to build those collaborative relationships, how do you work with all those folks? How do you manage what now is a $94 million budget between those 4 divisions? And
94 million?
Because the needs of maybe like Detroit are very different from the needs of like Turner.
Which, you're on a roll right now. Outstanding.
Look at you. Just
Yes.
I got numbers too off the top of my head.
Yeah, he's
right?
like, do you know that the population of Marion County has decreased from last year? I was like, what? And he's like, yeah, we're down like 3,000 people, I think, overall. And I was like, I had no idea.
From 2020 to
2020. I thought it was last
2022.
year. I was trying to figure out where 3,000 people went in a year.
Yeah.
Some of that becomes probably a deeper conversation than this podcast. But nonetheless, yes, great point in the uniqueness. One of the things that when I had the opportunity, and I very much consider it's a privilege and an opportunity to be the sheriff, was looking at what have we, let's put it this way, what can we do better? One of the things that we can do better is get out into those communities because being very much front and center, meeting people where they are, I have learned very much the uniqueness of those communities. Communities that before, when I was in enforcement, I was much more responsive to go. And this gives me the opportunity to be more proactive, to actually get out in the communities, have those conversations, and
Build
figure
those
out
relationships.
Yes. And priorities are different. And so depending on the communities, Detroit versus Aurora, the priorities may be different. We may be talking about the same overarching issues, but how we want to respond to those and how the community sees the need to respond to those, you really have to be able to look at the services that we provide and how do we tailor those services to meet the individual needs of the communities that we are being asked to provide them into. And it's been a really great experience over this last year and a half, really getting to know the folks that make up those communities and hear their voice and give them a voice, because public safety, I think we get it confused sometimes, and we think that public safety is law enforcement. Yeah. But really, public safety is the community. It's the community and law enforcement working together, and the community has to have an active investment into what it looks like for their own public safety for us all to be successful.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people don't realize, how many layers to the onion there is. They see city law enforcement, and then there's county, like, the county patrols like, highways and, the rural areas. And then you got state patrolling the freeways. But you partner with small cities. Like we live in Sublimity. We don't have a dedicated police department. So we have to.
We have a contract agreement with
the county.
We have an amazing deputy that.
Yeah.
You have Chief Barber now.
Chief.
Now,
Sorry.
technically, he goes by Senior Deputy Barber,
Okay.
but I think, and I have learned very well, because as you all know, I live in Sublimity as well, and so out there, he's referred to as Chief Barber. It is absolutely
Chief Barber. So when I get pulled up, I need to call him Chief Barber.
Hello, Chief Barber.
Hello, Chief Barber. How
Our
are you
kids love
today?
him, by the way. Like, we drive by and they see him and they're like, "There's Tom," and so I'm like, "You need to call him Mr. Barber."
Well, it gets back to your point of the uniqueness of communities. And so one of the things that we do have between Sublimity, Aurora, Jefferson, we've got some partial contracts with like the city of Detroit. And it is finding the right deputy, the right person. And one of the things that's really helped us is that, so when we have an opening in a contract city, we actually involve the city in the selection of that deputy. And so they have a say. They get to interview and ask the questions that are important to them. And that's where Tom has just absolutely excelled in Sublimity, is his relationship building skills with that community, his ability to be responsive, but also to be that compassionate person that everybody loves in the school. And we're all happy when Tom walks into City Hall. That's
such a good guy.
That's what Tom has done. But it's really addressing the uniqueness of the community. And not all of the deputies, this is what they want to do. They don't want to be isolated or have to work in that small setting. They want to be able to patrol what is 1,200 square miles. And so, yeah, the unincorporated area, and you have a population of about 110,000 that makes up that unincorporated area. But we span all the way from the corner, get out to St. Paul, that you may go from St. Paul on a call to Detroit on a call.
Yeah, that's a huge.
And an hour later you arrive, and it's the kind of vastness of what the county looks like, but it's what makes being a county deputy unique as opposed to working in the city. And then the fact that the sheriff's office encompasses, if you look at ORS, what I have to do, I'm mandated to do. I'm mandated to run a jail. I'm mandated to run search and rescue. I have to serve civil papers. I have to provide court services, meaning that I have to provide judicial security. So what is very interesting for a lot of folks is they don't realize I'm not mandated to provide enforcement services. That's not actually something that the sheriff's office is mandated by ORS to do. No, if I chose not to, if Marion County did not, then it falls to the state police. And so the state police actually ends up picking up those unincorporated areas, and it falls under their purview. But where we do have enforcement services, and most counties in this state provide some level of enforcement services, that's what also gives us the opportunity then where you have some cities, incorporated or unincorporated, that don't want to have their own police, then we're able to pick up those contracts and provide those services as well for them, which really kind of rounds out kind of the uniqueness and what makes being and working for the sheriff's office. It's what makes it special. There's myriad of opportunities, whether you want to work in community corrections, you want to work in the jail, you want to work on the road. And then if you want to work on the road, there's a number of specialties. There's a ton of advancement opportunities. There's a ton of opportunities so that you can spend a couple years kind of perfecting one area, but then you do have the opportunity to move to another area if that's something that's more interesting to you at the time.
So with that, I mean, there's a big recruitment push that you probably need constantly to feed the amount of people that you need. I know over the past couple of years, it's probably recruitment's been tough, probably across the country, with no specific community being like this is our fault. This is something that happened maybe across the United States affects you over here. So what does your ideal client ideal candidate recruit look like as far as bringing someone in, and are you able to meet the needs of what the community wants as opposed to the people that are applying for this?
That is a complex question with a whole lot to unpack, but I think we can kind of simplify some of it. So very true. The law enforcement, sort of the desire to be part of law enforcement, has changed significantly, and especially if you look at the last 4 or 5 years. It doesn't take much to know these considerable incidents that are happening across the country, and then how that is being reflected upon law enforcement and whether people want to get into this as a career. We've also seen a changing in our sort of generationally, and we have folks now that are wanting to get into law enforcement, but 4 years later, they want to do something else. And this was not, when I got into law enforcement, you got into it, you looked at that 25-year mark and you said, that's where I'm going. Now we have folks that decide, hey, I want to give 4 years, or I want to give 5 years, and then they want to go do a different job. And it's really up to us to create the balance, because if that person that wants to come in for 4 or 5 years is the best person for the job, that's going to be the best person to represent this community, I want to bring them in and I want to give them a job and I want to put them to work. Absolutely. And we're constantly trying to then encourage them to want to stay. And I don't want to make this sound like we have a waterfall going out the door, because we certainly don't have a waterfall. We just have different things that we have to account for these days that we didn't have to account for before. That's why we started, when I came in a year and a half ago now, one of the first things that I was ready to admit was that I didn't have all the answers. And part of those answers were understanding our next generation. And so we had tried recruitment efforts here, there. We involved a lot of our internal agency and what do these recruitment efforts look like, but we weren't really hitting the mark. And so what I mean by that is I don't believe we were getting into all the communities that we needed to find the right people for the office. And I made it very clear on day one, I will not sacrifice quality for quantity.
Sure.
Absolutely not. That's not what the citizens of Marion County deserve. And so we have to try and find the right people. So we engaged an outside third-party recruiting agency. We've been working with them for about the past year. We have started to see our applications rise now. But one of the things that they provide for me is analytics. And so if we're able to reach out to a community we haven't reached out to before, are we seeing a response? And if we're not receiving a response, why is that? And so really looking at the data-driven approach of how to recruit, and then getting our message out. And getting our message out now in what I think is a new and innovative way that we weren't getting our message out before, because we have a lot of our younger folks, they are social media, they are digitally organized, it's their life now. And so when I looked at our website, no, our website was not something that you looked at and you're like, that's where I want to go. That's where I want to work. And so really trying
It's
to...
like, that's where my dad works, or that's where my grandpa or uncle works.
Yes.
Yeah, that sort of thing.
It felt like a government website.
Yeah, you're at like circa 2000 and looking at it going, we invite people to come to the website, but if the website doesn't, then grab them. And so we have a new slogan at this point, and our new slogan is "Make the Move." And it really becomes an adaptable slogan as to, it doesn't matter what point of your life you're in. I had a great conversation about 2 weeks ago with an individual that's in his 40s. And his conversation was, am I too old? And my first answer to him was, some of my SWAT guys are in their late 40s. No, you're never too old. You can always do this. If you have the commitment and you have the desire and you have the drive and you want to help your community, we want to help you succeed in those goals. And so for those people that are apprehensive, that I'm not really sure, well, I've got a recruitment team. I've got great ways that we can bring you in, show you what this work is, and truly help you to make that decision. But when you do and you're like, I want to try this. Okay, well, this is what the process looks like. This is how we get you in the door. And then these are all the things that we will do to help you succeed, because that's the goal. The goal is, if someone comes in, I want that person to succeed. I want to do what we can. And so taking away some of that apprehensiveness that people think they're kind of going to be thrown to the wolves. No. Absolutely not. We have a very extensive training program, and we will walk you through that extensive training program, understanding that not everybody is going to follow a straight line to success. There's going to be ebbs and flows, and we'll help you with those ebbs and flows. So
then does your focus then shift once they do come into the fold to, okay, once they're here and you see that they're a great asset to you, now you focus on retention? Like, how do we keep them?
So we go to the retention side, and the retention side, the biggest part of that is the communication side. And so we are a paramilitary structure. We are an organization that follows a paramilitary structure. We've got that command staff, but I don't want that as the feeling in the agency. We are not so big at 400 employees that what I see us, we're a family. And if we're a family, what that means is conversation goes both directions. You have got to give people a voice at your line level that are constantly doing these tasks every day. Those folks are the engine that drives this ship. And so myself, the executive team, we're policymakers. We are the ones that look and ensure that we're going in the right direction. We're looking at 5 years down the road, where are we going to be and how do we get there? But we can't forget the folks that are doing the work every single day. And so highlighting the good things that they're doing, trying to get our folks to good training, and then listening to what kind of ideas do they have. I got one of the best ideas, and I've heard in a long time, out of a meeting yesterday with one of our line level folks that just said, hey, what about this? Those are the ideas that I want, but they have to feel like they can share them, and then they have to see some return on them. And so
that's a buy-in.
Yeah, that's where that retention comes from. It comes from investment and buy-in, and really having pride in the agency, having pride in the job that you do. Wake up every morning, and if you don't start your day saying, how can I do better? Then you're failing at the day, because we can always do better.
So I noticed, with the sheriff's department, you probably got more opportunity for people to come in, not only do, vertical movement as far as their career goes, but there's also lateral opportunities where you can go, I kind of did this and I want to do this thing over here, and maybe kind of go back and forth. So
absolutely. So one of the things that we find that we have to train a little bit more these days than we didn't have to train before is just simple communication. And I tell folks,
that's like a generational thing, like across the board. I feel like no matter what industry you're in or what avenue you're in, like that's something that's a challenge across the board.
So if you can hand two people cell phones, they can have a conversation all day long. They'll never open their mouths, but they can converse all day long. Unfortunately, that does not work in the public safety realm. So we've got to teach these good communication skills. One of the best places that you can get those is working in the jail. Working,
Really?
Oh yeah, working in the jail, we have a direct supervision jail, and so by direct supervision, what I mean is that the AICs, the adults in custody, they are out, they're experiencing the day room, and that deputy that's working with them, you are interacting, engaging with multiple people every day. And so the enforcement side, when you're responding to calls or things like that, you kind of get forced interactions, traffic stops, things like that. But the jail actually, no, you're just existing. I mean, you are the one responsible for the care and safety of these folks that are in the jail while they're there. You're responsible for the discipline and order of the facility and making sure that happens. Yeah. But you're constantly interacting. So one of the things that we see our folks that come to work in the jail, then they want to go either work in community corrections or they want to work in enforcement. And so we have it so you can do transfers between the different divisions if that's something that you want to do. You're going to have to eventually get the certifications for the different disciplines, but we can help you work through that. The undersheriff and I bring this up with everybody on day one. We are very encouraging for you to look at everything the sheriff's office has to offer and see what it is and where you want to go. And one of the things that makes us proud is that when we get somebody that comes back to meet with us on their new day one, because they've been working in the jail for 4 years, but now they're going to go work in community corrections. And so they're back for their new day of day one. And we can use them as an example as to there are plenty of opportunities here in the sheriff's
you're
office.
not stuck in one. Okay.
No, there's lots of things. And then within the divisions, there's special teams, whether you're talking about SWAT or the traffic team. We now have our fully functioning SUAS or drone team. And so there's lots of also secondary functions and activities that you can get into within the sheriff's office and really kind of keep it interesting. You mentioned one when you talk about working in sublimity. There's folks that want to go work a contract for a few years. So they come out of the big patrol kind of bucket and they go work a contract for a few years and then they want to go back in. So you can kind of continue to change up those things. And then obviously we have advancement opportunities as far as leadership and things like that. But it's really what you want to do, what you want to put your time into and where you want to focus your goals. But there's many chances to get involved and opportunities to kind of better yourself or move your career along.
Is that kind of a new approach? Because I feel, and maybe this is just a misconception on my part, but I feel like my idea when you got into law enforcement, say like in the 90s, early 2000s, you got in, and if you're going to be a deputy, you're working your way up the ranks with your goal to be, some sort of leadership position. But you don't deviate from that. Like I don't remember hearing a lot of people going from being like in patrol to like, oh, I'm going to go work in the jail now. Sure. Or I'm going to go, work in administration or whatever the case may be. Do you feel like that's kind of a newer approach?
I think the opportunities have always been there. Really encouraging our folks. The undersheriff and I may be a little bit more forthright with that encouragement that we're here to support that movement if there's something different you want to do.
So it's like, you're really good at this. You should just kind of stick here because you're.
But that was the old school way of thinking. like if you're good at this one thing, you don't deviate from that.
But some of them like it. So we've got some of our deputies that have been deputies their entire career. They've worked on the road their entire career. Now they may have worked in some special teams along the way, but that's what they wanted to do. And then there's other folks that I'm one of those believers that if you complain about what is happening, then you really need to find yourself either trying to get into a position of leadership where you can make change. Otherwise, complaints without a plan, I don't really understand. Give me some sort of solution of where we're going. And you see those folks that naturally, the leadership roles are really interesting where very rarely do you have the person applying for a sergeant or a lieutenant position that hasn't, even just as a deputy, taken leadership roles in the deputy, whether it be within their patrol teams or other things like that. You really see the kind of leadership desire start to develop. And so whether you go the actual route of wanting to promote or whether you just try and grab leadership roles within the daily things that you're doing on some of the special teams and other things like that, everybody's career is different. Everybody's kind of perception and what they want to do is different. But it's really for us to help them find what that, similar to when I went to college and decided I didn't want to be in medicine anymore and wanted to go into law enforcement. What is that niche that works for you?
Yeah.
And we want to help support you to get there.
So everybody in their career usually has something that keeps them up at night. What is a sheriff? What keeps a sheriff up at night?
So every time you promote, your span of control changes. So when you are a deputy, you are responsible generally for yourself and those that are out there on the road with you. That also includes like collaboration with other agencies.
Yeah.
You promote to supervisor, you get a team. You promote to lieutenant, and when you promote to lieutenant, now you have multiple teams, and that span of control changes. What I find and what keeps me up at night is that I am now responsible for the entirety of the agency. And so when you think about, these are all 24/7 operations. Our community corrections is a bit more 8 to 5, but they adjust off. But there's so many things that are going on 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. That's where my stress comes from, because with 400 employees and
So you're just having nightmares about command structure, is what you're saying.
it's not, it's more the safety of my own folks.
Yeah.
So it's balancing that. I want to do the best that we can for our community, and then I want to ensure that we are doing the best that we can to take care of our employees. And so those two balances are constantly on your mind.
Yeah.
And yeah, nobody can see it in the room, but my wife is sitting over here, and she's obviously very well. It's not a job that you put down. It's very,
There's no
very
off
hard.
switch.
No, there was a joke earlier about my 2 phones, and Sam will tell you about my 2 phones, that my 2 phones never stop. And she just wants to know which phone is ringing and who is calling, because she's fairly in depth to this now. So depending on who's calling, she can start to figure out what's the gravity of the problem. And is the gravity of the problem going to leave me at home where I'm at? Or is the gravity of the problem now going to take me, because I need to go solve this problem where it is?
Yeah.
And so the constant, I kind of mentioned the concept of we can always do better, and how do we do better? That's a stress that I carry around. I know my undersheriff does, my executive team does, is this, how do we constantly take what we're doing today, make it better tomorrow, and plan for 3 years, 5 years, 10 years down the road? Because succession only works if you make the people behind you better than you.
Yeah.
That's succession. And so you're kind of constantly carrying that around, saying, where do I mentor over here? Where do I teach over here? How does accountability come into it? Just to continue to, I didn't get to the 3 things of importance, but the 3 things being those we serve. And when we talk about those we serve, the constituency, the citizens of Marion County. The second is those who we represent, and that is the government, the county government, the leadership that we represent. And then those that are inside our agency, our own employees. Balancing the needs of those 3 groups constantly. Is, in a weird way, it's kind of like being the parent, because you're looking at your 3 children and your individual needs of your 3 children, and you want to make sure that you're taking care of all of them. And you don't want to be one that gets so spread out that you're giving 75%. No, I want 100%. I have very high expectations, and I'm constantly looking for that 100% in all categories. But to do that, it has to be very intentional, and it never stops.
Yeah, you really have to have some elasticity in your department to be able to meet the needs, because it shifts. I'm guessing throughout the year, throughout the day.
Throughout the day would be better.
I was going to say probably throughout the day.
The worst thing that you can do in this business is leave, and we'll just say arbitrarily on a Monday, and think that you have a plan for Tuesday. Because by the time you get to work on Tuesday, there's going to be 3 or 4 fires that you're going to be addressing. Now,
that you didn't even anticipate.
Nope.
You're like, well, I did not have that on my radar.
Those were not on the schedules.
No, right here, you're not supposed to do that today.
My executive assistant knows that very well, and so she is the master manipulator of the schedule and being able to adjust around, just because she thinks she's got me going to these places today, and then I will throw it at her early and say, nope, I've got to go handle this. This is the priority today, and this is what's going on. So we now need to make those arrangements around everybody else. And that's the balance of the collaborative partners, the other police chiefs. That's the balance of working with our county commissioners who, this last year and a half, the county commissioners are absolutely outstanding. over 70% of the general fund goes to public safety, and their investment into what public safety is really remarkable. And I've learned this being in this position and seeing 35 other counties. And some of the relationships and how other counties try to get things done. And this county is special, but it is special because of the relationships that we have. It is special because we are an outcome-driven county.
Yeah.
And we don't get lost in that. And so that doesn't mean that at times that we are not a dysfunctional family, because we are. And we can go into the boardroom and we can have conversations where I'm not really sure where it's going. But what we know is we're driving towards an outcome, and we stay focused on that, whether it's the Board of Commissioners, the Sheriff's Office, the DA's office with DA Paige Clarkson, our Health and Human Services with Administrator Ryan Matthews. Everybody comes to the table and says, what's that outcome? How do we get there? And how are we going to work collaboratively? And just like you're seeing out of 4002 this year, and we really drove 4002 in the legislature. Marion County was the model and continues to be. The reason that we are the model is because of that collaboration, because we are willing to all work together for the best outcome and not try and do things in silos.
So what do you think is like your core challenges in the community right now? Is there a consensus as like these, like 2 or 3 things are the things we need to focus on this year or going forward?
It was good when you got to 3, because I go past 2.
Yeah.
3 is it. And so when I talk about the 3 challenges, really the addiction crisis, theft, and then community violence. And what's really interesting about those 3 is they all sort of intermingle. Yeah. There's a nexus from that addiction crisis that goes to theft and why theft is occurring. There's a nexus from the addiction crisis that gets to where we see community violence. There's a nexus into homelessness. And so taking those 3 challenges and really putting those up on the board and saying, here's 3 things that we need to work on and how do we do better in all of these categories. And when we talk about how do we do better, that's how do we get to the root of a problem? How do we not be the Band-Aid that just keeps the truck or whatever moving down the road? How do we actually look at making a difference in those 3 categories? Our LEAD program, our law enforcement assisted diversion, which has now become the model for the state. That's how we're really trying to tackle the addiction crisis. There's a misconception about there that one of the first things you have to understand is stability. And I'll avoid getting too cerebral on this podcast, but so that stability starts in the insula, and it starts with how do we feel and how do we feel about ourselves. And so to get someone into treatment, which is really, I wish everyone was raising their hand and saying, I'm next, please. Yeah. But for a lot of folks, the instability and the uncertainty in their lives, that's why they make midbrain decisions that are satisfying in the moment. And in the moment, it's easier to get high than to deal with the rest of the world.
Yeah.
So we've got to be able to get those folks into stability to then get them into treatment, ultimately trying to get to gainful employment, get them into stable housing, and get them contributing back to the livability of our community. But addressing those 3 topics, and then looking kind of at as those branch out, that's really what the focus is, and that's the focus that no matter where I go, the uniqueness of all of our communities, somewhat. Apparently, I shouldn't hit the mic. Those 3 things come up.
Yeah.
So they may prioritize differently. The community violence, we saw some of the statistics that came out from Salem. And so we have now done our own community violence study, and we're going to be sharing that data. So that, like if you're in Northeast Salem, you're going to say community violence. That's really, really important to you. If you get some of our outlying communities, you're going to tell me about theft. Yeah. Unfortunately, all of our communities with the fentanyl crisis and other things that are going on, the addiction crisis touches all of our communities. It touches all families. Almost all families can talk about some point in time where they know something about the addiction crisis, where it's been either very close or they've had a friend or another family. So those 3 things resonate, and so those 3 things have really become my priority in how we continue to address those moving forward.
So you guys sound like you're more solution driven. Like, okay, so here's the issue we have. Here's the solution. Now let's work backwards and see how we can
outcome driven.
Yep.
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 No different than mental health crisis that's going on. And we know there's a mental health crisis. Unfortunately, what we see is a lot of situations where you really have a dual diagnosis going on, where you have an addiction crisis and a mental health crisis going on at the same time. So one of those that I've become sort of very astute to in this last year that's been different for me is really working on the legislative side of that as well. And so I'm part of the Oregon State Sheriff's Association, their legislative committee, as well as working with my commissioners, as well as working with the Association of Oregon Counties, and working with our representatives and our senators as to what does change look like? Because yes, here's the outcome. This is where we need to get to, but how do we actually get there? And I think what we're getting better at right now is commonsensical approaches. Because if you look at your citizens, and they want to talk about one of two things. They either want to talk about analytics, like show me the data.
Sure.
Where is the data? And I want to see the data and why the data drives your approach. And then you've got your group that doesn't care about data. They just care about, do they feel safe?
Yeah.
Do they feel safe? Would they let their children walk around downtown Salem? Would they let their children walk around their neighborhoods? They don't care about data. They care about a feeling. And so you've got to be able to balance those two and really address from both aspects of this group over here. How do we fix that feeling of safety? And this group over here, how do we show them the data, which we've really been focusing on this year is getting that data. And then you've got some that are in between, that they want to see a little data, but they still don't feel safe. And so that is sort of a nationwide. I know we hear that conversation, especially going on right now with the presidential race, and we hear the FBI data. And so just because something is a nationwide concept doesn't mean that it applies to Oregon or to Marion County. We know that we have a rise in our juvenile violence. And so one of our outcomes is how do we reduce our juvenile violence that's going on? Well, now we've got the data to understand why that, where or why that is coming about. But a lot of it is getting back to mentorship. And we've gotten away from things like mentorship, where we're trying to really get involved in the community at a different level. And instead of going in and telling people you need to change, we need to be able to provide those that have lived experience that can come in and have that conversation to achieve that rapport that then gets you to influence and persuasion. Because without the rapport, you're never going to get there. But who are those folks that we can intentionally find in the community to bring on to collaborate with us to really influence that change? That is a direction that we are absolutely working on when it comes to juveniles and community violence and some of those issues.
So these are like really big picture items, start nationally, come down to the state level, and then roll down to county, city budgets, or handling the strain of all that. These items that you were talking about, how much strain do they put on your budget as far as we need to put a lot of focus on this, but we're taking things from other areas?
So significantly. If we go back to mental health and we talk about mental health, so generally the state is responsible for what mental health looks like. That would be better served at times to allow the counties more access to control those funds and how those funds are distributed, specific to trying to improve what is going on within the county, as opposed to trying to meet this overall picture that really doesn't play well, like in Marion County, or if you talk about Marion County versus Union County. Those are two totally different things. But if we take one state approach and try and solve that problem at a state level, we're not necessarily putting the funds where they need to for either one of those counties. So really giving our commissioners more chance to control those funds. It's SRTF and it's secure treatment facilities for the mentally ill. We just don't have it. Secure residential treatment facility, SRTF. We don't have those beds available. And so you have folks that are in need. They have persistent or severe mental illness, but we don't have a place to get them into treatment. It's not that they don't want treatment.
That's where the disconnect comes in with people like, why aren't you doing something about that guy on the side of the road? And he's like, you don't have a place to put him.
We finally have an actual SRTF that's being built here in Marion County. And that is absolutely awesome because right now we're looking across the entire state to find those beds, but we will actually have those beds available to us. And again, this is your local government here in Marion County advocating for the things that we need and then working in the legislature to get the funding and helping those that are driving those causes, giving them the support that they need to get those things across the finish line. That's that 3-year, 5-year down the road. And how do we continue to make things better as opposed to just looking at it and saying, well, it's working now. Dick Withnell, and I'll give Dick Withnell some props right now. He's got one of my favorite lines of late. And what Dick talks about is very simply where we go wrong is that when things are working or acceptable, then we stop looking out and we stop doing. We just kind of live in that world of it's working. And we need to avoid that world. We need to constantly say, that's fine, it's working, but how do we make it better? And I think that is really where all levels of Marion County government right now, to include our representatives and our senators, and you're really seeing some bipartisan work finally happening that is saying, okay, but how do we make it better? And that is what we are constantly having those conversations and looking at, like this upcoming legislative period. And what do we need to focus on? What are the most important things that'll bring the most benefit back to livability within Marion County with that commonsensical approach?
Is there some site? I mean, a lot of people go through their daily lives not knowing all this is going on, which is normal. I mean, that's what you want. People have blinders on to what's going on around them until it actually happens to them or it happens to a family member. And then they get involved in like, why is this problem happening? Is there what sites would you suggest people in the county should go to for fraud? If there's a fraud thing that's happening that's affecting people in the county, or crime statistics, or anything else it's directly in our community that people can go and look towards, like, okay, I didn't know this was going on, or this is good information to know to keep me safe.
So it's a very good question. The city of Salem, we do the same thing. We'll put stuff on our websites for information, or my downtown community response unit. Great places. But I think the key to where you were at is get involved. And what I think I've found a lot is going into neighborhoods now, that if you talk to neighbor A over here, and I realized, okay, there's the camera. You talk to neighbor A over here, and you talk to neighbor E over here.
Yeah.
One of the things is these two neighbors aren't talking. And so they have the same concerns. They're seeing the same issues. They want to fight for this, but they don't know how. And then they feel siloed. And a lot of that came out of a lot of what happened in 2020 and 2021. We kind of created some social isolation. Isolation.
It's a word somewhere.
We're going to make it a word.
Isolation. Isolation. And so what we're really encouraging right now is we need folks to get involved. When we're going to go to the legislature, we can absolutely talk about it from a law enforcement perspective. We can talk about it from a commissioner perspective. We can talk about this from what are the representatives hearing in their communities. But what we need is we need folks to get involved that want to come give a personal story. Talk about your personal journey and give that information back to the legislature, because that has a tremendous value. And we go back to 4002. One of the most significant pieces of all the testimony that went into 4002 was when I took 3 of our navigators who have lived experience, and I took them to testify. And so now, these 3 navigators would have never assumed that they would ever be sitting in front of the legislature actually having this conversation or being given this opportunity. But the enormous weight of what they had to say, because it's not me trying to anecdotally talk. It's not me trying to read data and tell you, hey, here's what the statistics or the analytics say. It's them telling you from their lived experience. And that was one of the big pieces for accountability, is that they were the ones that absolutely said accountability is necessary. And we know that from science. Science will tell you accountability to get to behavioral change, you need it. But the lived experience, folks, that's more important. So really trying to get the community to get involved, reach out to us. Let us know. We're trying to have those community meetings. We're trying to be, again, meeting people where they are, giving them a voice, and then being respectful of that voice to then give them those outlets that you're talking about. Go here, do this, please become more involved, because we want to do this as a community, not as these sort of silos that are trying to do different things at different times.
So you need that human element, so it's not just all facts and graphs and figures.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. And we all know it, right? We sat at home with our grandparents or whatever, and we heard the stories about walking to school in 3 feet of snow, and I walked uphill the
both
whole way.
ways.
Okay. We learned social norms from that, and we learned work ethic from that. We learned a lot of things from that, and the stories that we can tell, they have tremendous value as to where did we come from. And based on where we came from, what did we learn? And how do we take that and apply that to where do we now want to go in the future? Yeah. What are the lessons? Where do we not want to be redundant because we know this has not worked? And so I hear this, I see this, where can we go?
So what message do you want the residents of like Marion County to know about the sheriff's office, as far as what message do you want to convey to them?
The message is pretty simple, and the message has to be intentional on our part, and the intentionality of that is that you have a voice, and we need you to participate in community safety. If the community is not participating, we're not getting the information we need. We are finding folks these days that are not reporting crimes to us, and we need to know when.
Why are they not reporting crimes?
So if you look at changes, and a lot of those have been legislative changes about things that can get prosecuted, or who stays in jail or doesn't stay in jail. These are controlled by the legislature. I don't make those decisions. And I know people would think, like the sheriff says, like you stay in jail or you don't. I don't. There's a Senate Bill 48 that actually completely controls through the Chief Justice and Presiding Justice who can stay in jail. And we want to get this information out to folks, but I need folks to then want to get involved. Ring cameras, we'll talk about those for a second. Those are the best thing ever invented. Yeah. And the reason is, so a lot of thefts may go unreported. But what I want is I want that information, because especially if you've captured an image on Ring camera, if you give me that image, I can then share that image, not with my agency, but with law enforcement across Marion County, and even outside of Marion County, we share that image, and somebody will recognize who that person is more often than not. But if you don't give me that video, then your neighbor down the street that may have had a theft, and your neighbor down the street that may have had a theft, if nobody's sharing this information, we can't put it together into a case. But if you all share this information, it may be that one Ring camera image that helps me clear up 10 thefts, because I now know that this person is responsible for all 10 of these thefts. And that is something that absolutely we can get prosecuted through the DA's office to hold people accountable. But again, it takes that community participation. So really being, we want to be intentional at reaching out and giving people a voice, but I want people to be intentional back towards us of wanting to be part of it and giving us that information and wanting to be a partner in their own safety. So
I feel like, so when you're talking about like the Ring camera and the neighbors talking with each other and everything, like Nextdoor is one of the, so Great we app. Actually found out, in little old Sublimity, there was, I can't say that anymore because we're not as small as we used to be.
It's still small.
It's growing.
Yeah, I know.
There's a whole new neighborhood going
in. I know, everywhere. So, but we actually saw one day, I think it was on the Nextdoor app, that there was somebody going around and breaking into cars. And that led us to go, well, wait, just kind of like, not really intentionally, but like, oh, I wonder if there's anything on our camera. And sure enough, there's somebody there. He's checking every single door handle. And I was like, wait a minute. Like, this happened middle of the night. We had no idea. Thankfully, all of our doors were locked. But then all of these other people started jumping on saying, oh, yeah, I have the guy over here. And he was moving that night.
It timestamps everything, so you gotta.
And that information, those neighborhood, the way the next door neighbor, we can get that information. So we don't directly get to participate in those groups, but we can have that information shared with us. And
that's what somebody said. They said, send it to Barber. He's going to want to see this.
And sites like Ring, probably you've had pushback, I think, as law enforcement in general. They don't want to share that with law enforcement.
which is okay. And so if it's something that you personally record that is your information, then you're the one that can voluntarily consent to us being able to see that. There are, whether it comes to cell phones and other things like that, we do have to write subpoenas for that information, but I can't write a subpoena for information that I don't know exists.
Yeah.
So if you tell me that something exists, then we certainly can use our investigative techniques to go out and acquire that information in the greater good of trying to solve this issue. But the Nextdoor app is great because it's a great way to look at, maybe I'm not the one that wants to go to every meeting. I don't want to go to the 7:00 meeting. I don't want bad coffee or Dale Donuts or things like that. But you can still be involved in your community if you're an active participant on that Nextdoor app, that when you're seeing things, report things, communicate with your neighbors. Neighbors communicating that, hey, the Judsons are taking vacation this week, and so they're not home. But some of their other neighbors know that they're not home. So now we're working together to watch their house and see if things change and report those things. It's that communication would be my big encouragement out to communities. Work together and build that strength in your community, build that camaraderie in your community, build that pride in your community, and make public safety a priority, because the sheriff's office will 100% come along with you on that ride. And we are happy to come out, give suggestions. I've done a number of actually small neighborhood meetings. I did one in a backyard with 10 people, which is great. Any place that we can get involved to talk about simple, cost-effective solutions by putting up lighting, by putting up some of these Ring cameras or other things like that, by locking your doors. I know that there was a generation that grew up and they're like, well, I don't lock my door. If they're going to come in, they're going to come in. Okay,
I was in that mindset for a while. I used to drive Brian nuts. He's like, what? The front door's unlocked. I was like, well, I had to come back at some point.
It may happen in my house every once in a while, but what we know is a lot of criminals are lazy.
Yeah.
And so when they're going along and they're checking doors handles, the reason they're checking door handles is because they're looking for the unlocked
easy grab.
door handle. Yeah. The ones that are locked, they keep moving. They're not going to take that time. They're not going to make that noise. They're looking for where lights are going to highlight them and other things like that. And so don't make criminals' jobs any easier by leaving your doors unlocked or not putting up that simple lighting that just says that you are being proactive about your property and your safety, and it's important to you. Very simple things that people can do, like I said, that are cost effective to help their own safety.
So I know a lot of people have the Ring door handle, or the Ring, what do you call it? The
Ring
doorbell?
Doorbell.
Door handle.
The door handle.
Handle.
I don't think we've got to the door handle yet, but
it's coming.
You may have just made the pitch.
It can get frustrating. You reveal like, man, someone's like pulling on my car door. Obviously, he's going to try to break in, but he didn't do anything wrong, so I can't report it. Is there? I mean, that's the mindset right now. Is people get frustrated, they see something happening that's out of their control. They're like, I can't report.
They're like, no crime.
Nothing's going to get done by it, and they just get frustrated.
Okay, so you just made an absolutely excellent point. So we have an online reporting portal.
Okay,
and so if you don't want contact from the sheriff's office, you don't need contact from the sheriff's office. You can actually work through online reporting. But you're one where you're reviewing a camera and you see gentlemen walk up there messing with doors. You've got a clear image of that gentleman. If you snap those images, you put those through our online reporting, you may have just captured the image of the guy that has been elusive to us for the last 2 months. You may now have and hold that image that allows us to identify him. And meanwhile, I've got 15 open cases associated with this person. We are just trying to nail down who this person is.
Okay.
And so if you take that couple moments to go on to the online reporting, you submit those photos, and it's just a suspicious activity. That's what you're reporting. You don't have any crime necessarily other than this person trespassed on your property potentially.
Yeah.
But that one key piece of information, that's the community getting involved. If you share that piece of information, you may solve 15 theft cases for your neighbors in your community. And you take that person who is now becoming a bit of a prolific property offender, and we may be able to now get a hold of that person, get them accountable, get them through the DA's office. And now we are all working together to improve our livability, because we're looking out for ourselves and we're looking out for our neighbors as well, strengthening that community bond. So that's a great example.
So it's like a modern day neighborhood watch. Like you used
Sure.
to have the people that would go out and like, walk the neighborhoods at night sort of thing.
Yep.
Back, like way back in the day.
Yeah, we're not carrying lanterns anymore, things like that.
No
Matching
flashlights.
jackets. Oh man, that would be so cool.
We and we do ask, because there are some communities that have like the neighborhood watches. The best thing you can be is a witness. We don't want people to unnecessarily involve them into situations that put them in a dangerous situation. If you want to do neighborhood watch, you see things that are going on, report those and be a very good witness to us. You can sort of, without getting involved, continue to watch or the other things like that, but don't necessarily instigate a conflict. Because now we have multiple problems that we have to work through, as opposed to get us that information so that we can respond and get there.
So wear your red beret at home. Just report in when you see something.
Just go online and fill it out and be like, I was going to chase him down and tackle him, but...
you when you're writing the narrative, you write whatever you want. So the whole thing, like you put your cape on
right now, listening to this, being like, "Yes, I've been waiting for a site like this."
It's my time. I got a mag light and I'm ready to go.
Let's go.
Our Ace Hardware is really good at blasting when people are.
I love State and Ace Hardware.
They do a good job.
Like, shout out to them.
Yeah.
They're like, do not ever try to steal from them. They will put you on blast. They'll put you on their
Everybody
display thing.
that follows them, we know exactly what someone looks like when they go in the Ace Hard and they try to steal something.
Yeah. So good on them.
Yeah.
So.
Community working together.
I know, right? Exactly. He's like, well, I'm just going to put up a digital billboard and blast it up there for everybody driving by.
So Carrie thinks at the end of the night, they plug you into the wall, they turn out the lights at your office. But I think you're a real human and you've got...
I never said that.
Yeah, and I think
just
you've
said you
got
don't
like
have an off switch.
hopes and dreams and you've got hobbies. What do you like doing for fun?
I think, and
he's like, I'm a real boy.
this is such a dangerous question, because you've got my wife sitting over here right now, and so when we
Sam's like, what are you gonna say,
mowing
sir?
the grass, doing dishes, that type of thing.
I think we've lost a bit of our fun in the last year and a half. There's just been a lot going on. I take the gravity of this position. I do not take it lightly. I take it very seriously. And so it's been a learning experience for me, even with all the experience that I had that I brought into this. It's still something that I've been learning. And so our fun for the last year and a half has been me being the sheriff. That's fair, right?
Like going to parades, like
That's
the
fun.
community stuff.
There's some benefits.
She's amazing in parades, by the way.
That-
If you've not seen Sam in her parade, you got to come out.
She is the parade queen.
I know, she's amazing.
I don't think there's any
I've
candy
noticed-
left past like a block, probably.
But she's just like right out, like, no, you see some like parades with county officials and stuff like that, and the spouse is in the passenger seat, which is great, and they're there for support. She is actually out there, trying to connect with the community. I think it's amazing.
All right, so this lends itself, so we're going to tell the best parade story.
I can't wait. Let's hear it.
So the first parade we ever did was we did the 4th of July parade in St. Paul.
Okay.
And that was, literally 2-3 days after I was appointed. And so we were originally planning to ride together. She decided she was going to walk. She was going to walk with one of my now commanders, Jason Bernards, and his dog. Well, I got ahead of them because they weren't walking fast enough.
He's like, I got a job to do.
Let's be clear. So we get to the end. I cross the parking lot to go back to the staging area. Well, Sam's nowhere to be found. And I'm not sure where she is. I'm not sure where she's gone. I know she's an adult, so she's probably going to find her way home.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure where she is. Well, then Jason and the dog come walking up. And of course, I look at him because it was his responsibility.
Where is my wife?
Yes, to ensure that my wife made it back to staging, and he has clearly failed at this point to do so.
No pressure.
And then a few seconds later, we one of my deputies that's out on the sort of perimeter running traffic, he gets a hold of us, and basically he's now got my wife. So we're all a little confused at what happened here, because if she kept walking straight, she would have walked into the staging area. I mean, it was right in front of her, but for some reason, she decided to turn right, walked all the way down the road to the traffic point, and then pretty much, in a lack of a better term, gets in the car with one of my deputies who doesn't know who she is at this point. And so my deputy now has this random person sitting in the vehicle.
She's like, I swear I'm the sheriff's wife. He's like, okay, ma'am.
We didn't get that. We didn't get that far yet. She just basically says, like, do you know where my husband is? And so I'm not sure he knew what was happening at that point because he had to come back with, well, who is your husband? And it was shared. My husband is the sheriff, which immediately obviously made him perk back up.
Yeah.
Now, like, I now have the sheriff's wife in the car. And so we did manage to rescue
This
her.
is some weird
And
tests I got going on.
I
Here.
know.
we got her back, but we still to
got
this
her
day,
back.
we have not figured out why she turned right and kept
Just
going on
going down
down
the road throwing candy at random people.
the
or-
rest of the parade was going straight. She went right, and the moral of the story is that my commander now lost her that day, and so we will never let Jason live that one down.
You had one job. Yeah, one
There you
job.
go.
Yeah.
That yes, one job. All you had to do was one job, and you
You just had
literally
to bring her home, and you dropped the ball.
less than a
buddy.
mile. You lost my wife.
Less than a mile. That's a record. That has to be a record for somebody.
It's
So.
Jason though, so Jason's a whole nother separate podcast.
We're gonna need to meet Jason.
So how do we support the sheriff's department and getting like your messages out, and what kind of links can you guys share with us too that we can put out to the community?
I think absolutely getting the links, and like I said, we're really working on what that website looks like. The sheriff's office forward facing.
Do you have an app?
Say that
Do
again.
you have an app?
We do
I
not
thought you
have
said,
an app.
"Do you have a map?" I was like, "Of the county."
I thought he
Or
said.
what are we-
I thought he said, "Do you want to take a nap?" And I was thinking
like-
it's not quite that time, yet, but we're getting
He's
closer.
like, "You booked me for an hour, so."
I think really, and the message for you all as you're connecting with the community is just that intentional message that we do want the community to be involved.
Yeah.
And if you, I don't care if you reach out and call us. I don't care if you see us on the street. We do a number of community events. Please come to those events. That is our opportunity to meet folks and really, kind of like we've done today, break down what the sheriff's office actually does. There's several misconceptions about what law enforcement does, let alone what the sheriff's office does. Yeah. So we want those communities to get involved. If you have community groups, neighborhood watch groups, and we haven't been out to have a conversation, there we go again. Reach out to my community resource unit, Sergeant Jeremy Schwab, and let us know. And we are more than happy to schedule those and get folks out. That is a priority to me, that we connect with the community and we spend the time doing that with the community. That is as important sometimes as us responding to calls. Everybody knows that that's our job and we will respond, and our safety is our priority, but it's also priority to build relationships and collaboration and to do this together. So if that's the message that you guys can help me share, that's an awesome message.
What if somebody wants to start their law enforcement journey? What do you encourage them to do?
So 2 things they can do. One, I have my recruitment team and we will help you start that journey. And if you have questions, please reach out to us.
Is it as simple as just picking up the phone or sending an email, or what works?
I will tell you, it is as simple as 503-588-5094. That will get you to my downtown sheriff's office, and we will get that message to the right person to have them contact you. If you see my folks on the street, if they're immediately involved in an incident, please give them a minute or 2. But when you see them,
You're like, I want to be a deputy.
I know. But when they're not immediately involved, no, go get a card. And when you get a card, we can again get you down to that recruitment team to be able to answer those questions. We've got the new recruitment site up now. So it's I'm gonna get this wrong, but I believe it's gomcso.com. If I'm wrong, my commander downtown is gonna get mad at me. But if you search the Marion County Sheriff's Office, you will be able to find our recruitment page, but go to our recruitment page. And absolutely, if this is something, if you have a little bit, a lot of bit, whatever that interest looks like, let us talk to you about it, because really it is much more complex, but yet much more rewarding than you may think it is. And so come talk to the folks that are actually doing the job. We'll get you on a ride along. If you want to see what the jail looks like, we'll get you into the jail. We can shadow our community corrections folks if you want to see what goes on in community corrections and supervision. We can do all of those things. You just have to take that step, make that move, and be willing to kind of put yourself out there, and we will help you with that journey.
All right.
Love it.
Well, Sheriff Nick Hunter, thanks for coming in. Good luck on your upcoming election.
I appreciate that.
Vote Nick Hunter.
Yeah.
Just saying a little plug there.
It's a good plug.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, you guys have been awesome. This has been a lot of fun.
Well,
More than
thank
happy
you.
to come back and
All right.
do this again.
So was this your first podcast?
This is my first official podcast. Yes.
Your bucket list is complete. You don't have to do anything else.
Do no more podcasts. I mean, unless they help you like along the way, then we'll.
I've
let you.
got. It's funny because yes, this is the first official podcast I've done, and I have another one scheduled for Thursday.
Oh,
Awesome.
You are still
No,
the
that's
first,
okay. We'll
and
take it.
you
We'll
will
take-
always be the first.
You know what?
that's right.
We're happy that you're getting out there,
Yeah.
and we love the work that you're doing in the community and just the visibility that you have. So we appreciate it.
I appreciate that, and I do actually like your one idea, and I think at one point maybe it would be good to get Commander Bernard's, and we could look at maybe individually into what those divisions are doing and kind of take a deeper dive into those. But you guys want to keep letting out that roadmap, I'm happy to come along.
Love it.
All right.
Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks.
Awesome.
All right.